The sun had just begun its slow crawl over the jagged mesas when the town of Dry Creek stirred to life. Dust swirled in lazy spirals along the wooden sidewalks, and the hollow clatter of boots echoed through empty streets. The townsfolk, weary and hardened by years of drought, violence, and betrayal, paused to watch the horizon. A lone rider approached an Apache man, tall and broad-shouldered, his long black hair catching the morning light, a silent promise of strength and mystery. Beside him rode a young woman, barely 20, her wide brown eyes shining with both fear and courage. Her name was Liora. She had grown up on a small farm at the edge of the valley, always careful to keep to herself. But fate, cruel and unpredictable, had led her to this stranger, Kael, the Apache warrior whose reputation preceded him like a shadow at sunset. The townspeople whispered as the pair drew nearer. Some spoke of Kael's deadly skill with bow and blade. Others muttered dark warnings about intertribal conflicts and the blood that trailed behind men like him. The sheriff, a wiry man named Jed Hawthorne, stepped onto the porch of the general store, squinting against the harsh light. "What's this? Another troublemaker, eh?" he called, his voice carrying across the street. A few men gripped the handles of their rifles, faces hard as leather. Mothers pulled children back into doorways. The tension was palpable. Kael's horse stopped at the center of the street. He dismounted smoothly, every motion controlled, deliberate. Liora followed, her small hand resting on his arm, a silent plea for protection and understanding. "We mean no harm," Kael said, his voice deep and calm, carrying a strange authority that momentarily silenced the murmurs. "We seek only shelter and safety." The sheriff narrowed his eyes. "Shelter? In Dry Creek? You know the law here. We don't welcome strangers. Least of all, Apache." His fingers twitched near the revolver at his hip. Leora's heart pounded. She had heard stories of men killed for less. But Kael did not flinch. He spoke slowly, each word measured. "We are bound by honor. I have vowed to protect her. And if you test us, you will see the cost." His gaze swept across the crowd, dark and unyielding. A few townsfolk shifted uneasily, though most held their ground, fueled by fear and prejudice. Just as the tension threatened to snap, a shout rang from the edge of town. A group of men stumbled into the street, dragging a figure between them. Blood soaked his shirt. His leg was twisted at a grotesque angle. The man, barely conscious, moaned in pain. He was a stranger, yet the townspeople's hostility faltered, replaced by urgent confusion. Kael moved before anyone could stop him. Kneeling beside the injured man, he examined the wound with calm precision. Liora knelt too, retrieving water from her canteen and dabbing the man's forehead. Who is he?" one townsman demanded, suspicion lacing his words. "He is an enemy," another whispered. "From the Red Hawk tribe, they've raided our lands before." Kael looked up, his eyes meeting the town's with quiet defiance. "And yet he bleeds here, and no man or woman should watch another suffer. Will you let him die before your eyes?" The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and compelling. A stir ran through the crowd. Some dropped their rifles, unsure. Others exchanged glances, wrestling with fear and conscience. Leora's soft voice joined Kael's, steady and pleading. "Please, we cannot let him die. If we save him, perhaps the world can change, even a little." For a long moment, the town was silent. Then Sheriff Hawthorne lowered his gaze, swallowing hard. "Fine," he said gruffly. "But know this. Your lives hang by a thread. One misstep, and we won't hesitate." Kael nodded, tending to the injured man with a mixture of skill and tenderness. Liora held his hand, silently thanking the fates that had brought them together. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows over Dry Creek, but in that moment, A fragile truce had been formed not through fear, nor prejudice, but through the courage to act, even when the odds seemed impossible. The town watched, unsure if they had witnessed madness or the first spark of change. And deep in Kael's eyes there was a promise. No harm would come to Liora, and perhaps, just perhaps, even the hearts of Dry Creek's most stubborn men could be swayed. The morning sun climbed higher, bleaching the wooden facades of Dry Creek's buildings. Kael's dark eyes never left the injured man as he worked quickly, wrapping the twisted leg with strips of cloth torn from his own shirt. Liora knelt beside him, dabbing the man's forehead with water, her hands trembling slightly. The townspeople had not moved closer. They remained on the edges of the dusty street, watching, whispering, debating whether to intervene or flee. Sheriff Jed Hawthorne scratched his chin nervously, his eyes darting between Kael and the wounded stranger. "I still don't trust you," he muttered under his breath. "You're Apache. You've got your own laws and your own blood feuds. What if he dies anyway?" Kael's gaze flicked up, calm but piercing. "I do not act for fear or revenge, Sheriff. Only to save a life." His voice carried the weight of certainty, and even the most hardened men hesitated. Liora placed a gentle hand on Kael's arm. "People will listen when they see the truth," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. "We have to help him, no matter what they think." The injured man groaned, shivering in the warm air. His skin was smeared with dirt and blood, and a gash ran across his temple. He belonged to the Red Hawk tribe, the very enemies who had raided lands near Dry Creek before. Some townsfolk muttered curses under their breath, while others quietly turned away, uncomfortable with the sight. Kael worked with deliberate care, using techniques he had learned from his elders. He cleaned the wound, pressed herbs from his small pouch into the gash, and gently straightened the injured man's twisted leg. Liora held the man's hand, murmuring reassurances in a soft, melodic voice. Slowly, he stopped trembling, and the tension in the street began to shift, just a fraction, but enough to be noticed. You're helping him?" muttered a farmer from the porch of his house, his voice trembling with disbelief. "He's Red Hawk. They'd kill us if they caught us like this." Kael did not flinch. "He is human first, enemy second. One life saved is worth more than 10 grudges held." The townsfolk exchanged uneasy glances. Some shook their heads, murmuring that Kael's words were foolish. Others, deep down, felt a spark of shame that they had been so ready to kill him and Liora for simply existing. As the injured man's breathing steadied, Kael stood and dusted off his hands. His chest glistened with sweat, muscles tense but controlled, and tribal jewelry clinking softly with each movement. He looked out over the crowd, meeting the eyes of those who doubted him. "We could leave," he said, voice calm, commanding. "But we chose to stay. We choose life over hate. You may follow our example, or you may not, but know this. Fear is a heavier burden than compassion ever will be." A silence fell over Dry Creek, broken only by the soft moans of the Red Hawk man. Leora's eyes met Kael's, admiration and awe reflected in her gaze. She had feared the townspeople's wrath, yet now she saw the subtle change stirring within them. The town that had once been ready to kill them both was beginning to see a flicker of something else: curiosity, respect, maybe even hope. Hours passed. The injured man was lifted onto a wagon, gently supported by Kael and Liora. A few of the townsfolk stepped closer to offer blankets and water. It was small, cautious help, but it was the first sign that hearts might soften. Sheriff Hawthorne approached Kael at last, his expression guarded. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But the people here, they don't forgive easy. You'll need more than courage to survive in Dry Creek." Kael's dark eyes softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "Then we shall show them, not with words, but with deeds." Fear dies in the light of action. As the sun began to dip behind the mesas, casting long shadows over Dry Creek, Kael and Liora guided the injured man to the small clinic at the edge of town. Dust settled over the street, leaving only footprints and a whisper of change in the air. For the first time since their arrival, the townspeople dared to watch without hatred. And somewhere in the distance, hidden among the cliffs, the first whispers of respect for Kael and Liora began to take root, a seed that might one day grow into trust. Night had fallen over Dry Creek, and the town was quiet except for the creak of wind through the wooden shutters and the distant howl of coyotes. Kael sat outside the small clinic, his muscular frame silhouetted against the flickering lantern light. His shirtless chest glistened with the day's sweat, and the tribal jewelry on his arms and neck clinked softly as he shifted. Liora sat beside him, her hands clasped in her lap, worry etched on her youthful face. The townspeople. They're still wary, she said softly. Her voice carried a mix of fear and hope. Some of them came close today, helping with the wounded man, but I can see it in their eyes. They're waiting for a reason to turn on us. Kael's dark eyes studied the shadows stretching across the dusty street. Fear is a powerful thing, he said, voice low, measured. But fear can be overcome if we act with honor. They have seen us save a life. That is a start. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the saloon. A group of rough-looking men emerged, carrying lanterns and crude weapons. Their faces were twisted with suspicion and anger. "We don't like your kind here," one of them shouted, pointing at Kael. "An Apache and a girl? And now you bring the enemy into our town? You're poisoning our people." Kael rose slowly, his muscles tense but controlled, the dim lantern light reflecting off his tribal jewelry. He did not draw a weapon. "I have harmed no one," he said calmly, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made even the boldest townsman hesitate. "I act to save lives, not destroy them. Step closer, and I will defend the innocent. But know this, I do not seek conflict with those who choose peace." The men hesitated, unsure whether to advance. But one, bolder than the rest, spat on the ground and lunged forward. Kael moved like lightning, not with violence but with skill and control, pushing the man back and pinning him to the ground without causing serious harm. The others froze, witnessing the restraint and strength of the Apache warrior. Liora's heart pounded. She had seen Kael in battle before, but even now, the way he handled danger without spilling blood was awe-inspiring. The townsfolk who watched from the shadows murmured, some with admiration, some with fear. Then the injured Red Hawk man, now stabilized thanks to Kael's care, groaned and struggled to his feet. "Stop!" he shouted in broken English, his voice weak but urgent. "No fight. We live. Because of him." The words hung in the air. The townspeople looked at the wounded man, then at Kael, then at Liora. Slowly. Some lowered their weapons, uncertainty replacing anger. Others grumbled but stepped back. Unsure how to respond, Sheriff Hawthorne emerged from the shadows, his face grim but measured. "Kael," he said, "you're unlike anyone I've ever seen. Most would have fought back, taken vengeance. But you show them mercy. That might be your only chance in Dry Creek." Kael nodded, not taking his eyes off the restless crowd. "Mercy and honor are stronger than hatred. People will remember deeds more than words. Let them see who we are, and what we fight for." Liora reached for Kael's hand, feeling the warmth of his strength and calm resolve. "They may hate us now," she said, "but they can change. You've already started it." The night stretched on, and Kael and Liora stayed near the clinic, tending to the injured man and watching the town. In the quiet moments between the creaking wind and distant howls, they began to sense a subtle shift. Fear was still there, but curiosity and respect had begun to creep into the hearts of some townsfolk as the moon climbed high above Dry Creek. Its silver light casting long shadows across the wooden streets, Kael whispered to Liora, "We will face many challenges, but we will endure. Our actions are stronger than their whispers. One day, they will see the truth." Liora leaned against him, her eyes fixed on the moonlit horizon. "And when they do, maybe Dry Creek will no longer see an Apache and a girl as outsiders, but as allies, friends, and protectors." Kael's gaze hardened, filled with quiet determination. The night held danger, but also possibility. In the Old West, trust was a fragile thing, but he and Liora were ready to forge it, one brave act at a time. The dawn arrived over Dry Creek with a fiery glow, painting the wooden buildings in shades of gold and crimson. Kael and Liora had spent the night at the edge of town, keeping watch over the injured Red Hawk man, who was slowly recovering thanks to their care. Even as the town began to stir, whispers followed them like shadows, a mix of suspicion and fascination. Kael stood near the small clinic, shirtless and imposing, his muscles tense and tribal jewelry glinting in the morning light. Liora approached quietly, holding a basin of water. "He slept most of the night," she said softly, "but I think he trusts us. And that's a start." Kael nodded, his dark eyes scanning the streets. Trust is fragile here. One misstep, one wrong word, and the town will return to fear and anger. We must be careful. But we cannot hide who we are. Before Liora could respond, a commotion erupted near the edge of the town square. A rider, dressed in tattered clothes and dust-covered boots, galloped into view. He carried news of a scout party from a nearby enemy tribe approaching the town. The word spread quickly, causing panic to ripple through Dry Creek. Men gripped rifles tighter. Women whispered frantically behind doors. Kael's jaw tightened. "They come for conflict," he said quietly. "But if we act with honor, we can prevent bloodshed." The injured Red Hawk man, now sitting upright with Liora supporting him, looked at Kael with gratitude. "You, Apache, you fight for no tribe? Only honor?" His voice was raspy but sincere. Kael gave a small nod. "I fight for what is right, even if it means standing against my own kind or defending the enemy. Justice has no boundaries." The townspeople watched, some with doubt, some with curiosity. Sheriff Hawthorne stepped forward, his hat pulled low over his eyes. "Kael," he said, voice rough but calm, "if you're serious about saving lives, you'll have to prove it. The enemy tribe is armed and dangerous. And the people here? They'll follow you only if they see strength and courage." Kael glanced at Liora, who gave a slight nod. She trusted him completely, and her faith strengthened his resolve. "Then we will act," he said firmly. "We will not let violence dictate our choices." As the scout party approached the outskirts of town, Kael led Liora and the recovering Red Hawk man to the highest hill overlooking Dry Creek. From there, they could see the enemy riders 10 strong, moving with precision and intent. Kael's muscles tensed in the morning sun, and his tribal jewelry clinked softly as he adjusted his stance. He raised his hand to signal a halt. "We do not fight for conquest," he said to Liora in a low tone. "We fight only to protect life." The enemy scouts noticed their presence and hesitated, unsure what the lone Apache warrior and his companions intended. Kael stepped forward, his posture calm but commanding. "We will meet you without bloodshed," he called, his voice carrying over the valley. "Turn back, or we will defend those who cannot defend themselves, but only to preserve life, not to destroy it." A tense silence fell over the valley. The scouts conferred, murmuring in a language Kael understood but the townspeople could not. Finally, with a reluctant nod, they withdrew, retreating into the rugged cliffs beyond the town. The townsfolk, who had gathered to witness the confrontation from a safe distance, stared in stunned silence. The Apache warrior had faced potential death without striking a blow, relying on courage, honor, and presence alone. Sheriff Hawthorne finally broke the quiet. I don't know what to say," he muttered. "Maybe there's more to this man than I realized. He may be dangerous, but he's honest too. Maybe the town should reconsider its prejudices." Liora smiled faintly, placing a hand on Kael's shoulder. "They are starting to see you, Kael. The hearts of men are slow to change. But your deeds are planting seeds." Kael gazed at the valley below, the town slowly coming to life, the townsfolk watching from windows and porches. "One act at a time," he murmured. "One act at a time, and fear will give way to respect. And perhaps even friendship." The morning sun climbed higher, and with it came hope. Dry Creek was far from safe, and distrust lingered in shadowed corners, but Kael and Liora had proven that honor and courage could shine brighter than fear. The town would remember this day, and so would the world. The night air in Dry Creek was thick with tension and the scent of wood smoke. Kael stood outside the small clinic, his muscular frame illuminated by flickering lanterns. The tribal jewelry on his arms and neck caught the light, glinting as he moved. Liora approached quietly, her hand brushing his arm. "The town is restless tonight," she whispered. "Some of them still whisper about us." "About you?" Kael's dark eyes scanned the streets. "Fear dies slowly," he murmured. "But courage and compassion can burn brighter than any doubt." Just then, a sudden cry split the night. Flames licked the edges of the general store, smoke twisting upward into the moonlit sky. A fire had broken out, likely accidental, but in Dry Creek, accidents often sparked panic. Townsfolk ran in every direction, shouting for help, some clutching water buckets, others simply frozen in fear. Without hesitation, Kael sprinted toward the blaze, Liora following close behind. His powerful frame moved effortlessly, his shirtless chest glistening with sweat, tribal jewelry clinking with each movement. He grabbed a bucket from a nearby well and began dousing the flames, directing terrified townspeople to help form a line. Liora ran beside him, her small hand steady as she carried water to the front of the fire. Some men hesitated, uncertain if they should trust an Apache warrior, but Kael's calm authority left no room for doubt. "Pass the water," he barked, voice echoing over the crackling fire. "Help those in danger, or the flames will consume us all." The injured Red Hawk man, now recovering, stood at the edge of the chaos, his eyes wide in awe. "Apache saves town?" he whispered. "Yes," Kael said without looking back, splashing another bucket over the roaring flames. "I fight for life, not vengeance. And tonight we save Dry Creek together." Slowly, the townspeople began to obey. Some formed chains to pass buckets. Others helped pull crates and barrels away from the fire's path. The energy of cooperation began to replace fear and suspicion, and Kael's commanding presence inspired even the most doubtful among them. Hours passed, the fire finally subdued, smoke curling into the cool night. Exhausted and covered in soot, Kael leaned against the edge of the well, breathing heavily but steady. Liora knelt beside him, her eyes wide with admiration. "You didn't just fight the fire," she said softly. "You fought their fear too." The sheriff approached, his expression grudgingly respectful. "Kael, I don't know how you do it," he muttered. "You came here, a stranger, and yet you've shown them honor. You've earned a measure of trust tonight." Kael's eyes softened as he looked at the sheriff. Trust is not given lightly. It must be earned with actions, not words. From the shadows, a few townsfolk emerged, nodding or murmuring thanks. Some still kept their distance, still wary, but the seed of respect had been planted. Even in Dry Creek, where suspicion ran deep, The courage to act for others without thought of revenge or gain was beginning to change hearts. Liora rested her head on Kael's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his strength. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "they may not love us, but they'll remember what you did tonight. And maybe that will be enough to start a change." Kael's gaze shifted toward the horizon, the mesas bathed in silver moonlight. "One act of courage can ripple through a town, Liora. Tonight, we've lit a spark. But the real work is just beginning. Fear dies slowly, but hope can last forever." As the night settled over Dry Creek, quiet returned to the streets. Smoke still curled from the charred wood of the general store, but the flames of trust and respect, kindled by Kael's honor, shone brighter in the hearts of those who had watched, uncertain yet inspired. And in that quiet, Liora knew they had taken another step toward changing the town forever together. Morning in Dry Creek broke with a gentle hush, the dusty streets bathed in golden light. Kael and Liora had spent the night helping the townsfolk clean up after the fire. The charred remains of the general store still smoldered, but the town was alive again, its people cautiously nodding to the Apache warrior and the young woman who had become his steadfast companion. Yet even as trust began to grow, shadows of doubt lingered. Some men still whispered behind closed doors, wary of Kael's heritage and his unyielding honor. They had seen his courage, yes, but could they truly accept an Apache man as one of their own? Kael stood at the edge of the town square, shirtless, muscles glistening in the morning sun, tribal jewelry catching the light as he moved with quiet authority. Liora approached, holding a bundle of clean water jars. "They're watching you," she said softly. "Even now some still doubt you. But we can't falter. Not now." Kael nodded. "Every action we take will be remembered, Liora. Fear dies slowly, but respect grows stronger with every deed." Suddenly, a messenger arrived, riding hard and panting. "Sheriff," he called, dismounting. "A group from the Red Hawk tribe is heading this way armed and angry. They're coming for the wounded man you saved." The words sent a ripple of tension through the town. Some men tightened their grip on rifles. Others simply froze. Kael's jaw set, his muscles tensing. "We face a choice," he said quietly to Liora. "Fight and risk bloodshed, or act with honor and risk mistrust. Either path tests who we are." Without hesitation, Kael moved to the town square, where the Red Hawk man was now standing, fear and gratitude battling in his eyes. "You helped me," the man said softly. "I do not want your blood on my hands." Kael placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Then we act wisely. We protect, but do not provoke. We will meet them with strength and mercy." As the Red Hawk warriors appeared over the ridge, the townsfolk held their breath. Kael stepped forward, shirtless and imposing, the sunlight glinting on his tribal jewelry. His eyes met theirs, unwavering. "We do not seek war," he called out, voice carrying over the valley. "We only protect those in need. Turn back, or we will defend life, not take it." A tense silence followed. The Red Hawk warriors exchanged murmurs, glancing at the injured man, then at Kael. Slowly, they lowered their weapons, recognizing that the Apache warrior who stood before them was of honor, not vengeance. The townsfolk, who had gathered to watch, gasped in astonishment. They had expected blood, perhaps even revenge, but instead, Kael had achieved what many thought impossible: peace without sacrifice, respect without violence. Sheriff Hawthorne stepped forward, a small smile breaking his usually grim expression. "Kael," he said, voice rough but sincere, "I think you've done more for this town in one day than any man ever could. Even those who doubted you, they are beginning to see the truth." Liora stepped beside Kael, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "You've proven that courage and honor can change hearts," she said softly. The town will remember this, and so will the Red Hawk tribe. Kael's eyes softened as he watched the Red Hawk warriors retreat into the distance, carrying the story of mercy and strength with them. One act of courage can ripple farther than any sword, he said. Fear and hatred may linger, but respect and trust grow stronger every day. As the sun climbed higher, bathing Dry Creek in warmth, the town seemed to breathe easier. Windows opened, doors creaked, and cautious smiles appeared on the faces of people who had once regarded Kael and Liora with suspicion. The seeds of trust had taken root. Kael and Liora stood together, watching the town come to life again. The road ahead would not be easy. They would face whispers, doubts, and future challenges, but the most important test had been passed. They had shown that courage, compassion, and honor could bridge even the deepest divides. And in the quiet moments, as the wind rustled through the dusty streets, Liora knew that Kael's deeds had changed not only the town, but the very heart of Dry Creek itself. The morning sun rose over Dry Creek, bathing the town in warm golden light. The dusty streets, once tense and hostile, now carried a sense of cautious calm. Kael stood in the center of the town square, shirtless as ever, his muscular frame adorned with tribal jewelry that glinted in the early light. Liora stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, a silent testament to their unbroken partnership. The events of the past days had shifted the hearts of Dry Creek's people. The fire, the rescue of the injured Red Hawk man, and Kael's fearless diplomacy with the approaching enemy tribe had earned their respect. Even Sheriff Hawthorne, once skeptical and wary, now regarded the Apache warrior with quiet admiration. The townsfolk began to emerge from their homes, some with cautious smiles, others with nods of acknowledgement. Children peeked from behind doorways, curious and unafraid for the first time. Old men who had whispered doubts now spoke softly among themselves, recounting the deeds they had witnessed. Kael's dark eyes scanned the crowd, alert but patient. He knew that trust could be fragile, easily broken by a single act of fear or violence. But as he observed the faces of the people before him, he sensed a genuine change. They had seen courage without cruelty, strength without malice, and mercy in the face of danger. Liora stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly across the square. Dry Creek has been tested, she said, her eyes meeting those of the townspeople. And it has survived, not because of fear, but because of honor. Kael has shown that bravery and compassion can change even the hardest hearts. A murmur of agreement ran through the crowd. Some men nodded, some women whispered words of thanks, and children clapped softly. For the first time, Kael felt the weight of true acceptance, not as a stranger, not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged. Suddenly, the sound of galloping hooves echoed from the outskirts. A small group of Red Hawk warriors appeared, led by the injured man who had been saved days earlier. They approached cautiously, hands raised in respect rather than threat. The townsfolk tensed for a moment, but Kael remained calm, stepping forward to meet them. The Red Hawk leader, once suspicious and fierce, now bowed his head slightly. "Kael," he said, his voice steady, "your honor and mercy have not been forgotten. We come not as enemies, but as allies, bearing thanks and respect." The townspeople watched in awe as the Apache warrior extended his hand in greeting. The two sides, once divided by blood and prejudice, stood together, united by the courage and compassion of one man and his steadfast companion. Sheriff Hawthorne stepped forward, finally allowing a smile to break across his weathered face. "Well," he said, voice gruff but warm, "looks like Dry Creek might finally learn what it means to trust again." Liora squeezed Kael's arm gently. "You did it," she whispered. "You changed this town." Kael looked around, eyes meeting those of the townspeople who had once feared him. "No," he said quietly. "We did it together." As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the wooden streets. The town of Dry Creek began to breathe freely for the first time in years. Children ran and played without fear, neighbors helped one another with chores, and laughter, tentative but genuine, returned to the streets. Kael and Liora walked through the town, greeting townsfolk, offering quiet words of encouragement and accepting nods of respect. The bond between the Apache warrior and the young woman who had trusted him completely had become a symbol, a living testament that courage, honor, and compassion could transform even the hardest of hearts. By nightfall, the town square was alive with celebration. A small fire burned in the center, casting warm light on the faces of people united by newfound trust. Music floated from the saloon, children danced around, and even the most skeptical townsfolk joined in, unable to resist the joy that had finally returned to Dry Creek. Kael stood with Liora at the edge of the square, looking over the transformed town. "This is just the beginning," he said, voice low but filled with hope. "Fear may return, but so will courage. Hatred may linger, but so will mercy. And as long as we stand together, Dry Creek will endure." Liora smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And so will we," she whispered. In the glow of the firelight, the Apache warrior and the young woman had not only survived the town's suspicion, they had reshaped it, proving that even in the harshest landscapes, honor, bravery, and compassion could create a home, a family, and a community united.